Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I've been wanting to make a lemon loaf cake that would rival Starbucks in quality, and so when my friend gave me a bag of lemons from her lemon tree, I decided that now was the time to do that. These are beautiful lemons, and so I start by washing them off in my sink in a colander. I initially had wanted to try and make an eggless version of this lemon loaf cake because where I live, eggs are $10 a dozen right now. I kept these stored in the refrigerator for 2 weeks until I could get to them, and they were just fine, but it's time that I start to use them. I also attempted to make an eggless lemon cake loaf, but that didn't work out, and I'll show you a picture of that later on in the video. It looked terrible, but actually some of my family members liked it better than the beautiful loaf of lemon bread or lemon cake. So I am just going to take the zest off of all of these lemons and juice them. And what I don't use for lemon cakes today, I will put in the freezer for another time. And if you've never seen the stem to a lemon tree before, they have thorns or spikes on them, so they can really rip up your arms if you don't wear a covering or use a fruit picker. I have a juicer attachment to my Bosch mixer that I have used many times before, but I just didn't want to get it out and also clean up after it. So I'm cutting these in half and then just squeezing the juice out by hand. If I'd had a handheld juicer or reamer, that would have been perfect for this amount of lemons. And also, lemons and lemon peel are the perfect cleaner for your garbage disposal. I wouldn't put a whole bunch down, but if you wanted to just put a quarter of a lemon or 2/4 of a lemon down your garbage disposal and run it with lots of water, that will make it smell really nice and fresh and clean. And here's the juice that I got from those lemons. I'm putting 3 eggs into a mixing bowl and then mixing them on high with my hand mixer. In preparation for making this, I read one recipe that said you should mix the eggs on high with a hand mixer for 2 minutes so that it would have a light and fluffy texture after it was baked. I don't really know what I'm doing at this point, and I really should look up the recipe and see what the mixing instructions are. When I wrote down the recipe, I just wrote down the ingredients and the baking temperature and time. but I just added 1 cup of sugar, white sugar, and then I'm continuing to mix it on high speed until it has a pale yellow color. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of softened butter, and this probably was not the right time to add it. I don't know. Everything turned out okay, but I felt like it was chaos mixing this up. Now I am adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And now I am adding 2 teaspoons of lemon extract. A third of a cup of the fresh lemon juice that I just squeezed. And I don't know why I didn't make it a full third of a cup. You'll do better than I did. And I am just pouring it through a strainer to get all of the seeds out of it. And into the bowl it goes. The recipe calls for the zest of 1 lemon, and I just added a very healthy pinch here, or 2 or 3 pinches. That might be more than what a lemon would have, but I did it and the flavor was good. I'm also adding 1.5 cups of flour. Now I am adding 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then after that I add 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and I also added 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. It probably would have been a better idea if I had put all of the dry ingredients, the flour and the leavenings, all in a separate bowl and mixed them together, and then added the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. But for some reason I didn't do it that way. Mostly I think to save on dishes. I'm adding 1/2 cup of vegetable oil, and you can add whatever kind of oil you prefer to bake with. And now I am just going to mix this all together. I just want to mention, so I don't forget, that if your cakes start to get too brown as you're baking them, you can always put a piece of aluminum foil over the top of them, tinted, which is to mean that you fold it in half and just lay it on top so it doesn't stick. But I did this halfway through the baking process on these cakes, and it kept them from burning on top. I have a loaf pan here that I'm going to bake my bread or my cake in, and I crumbled up a piece of parchment paper that fits in the bottom of it so that it would not be as slippery. It would have a little more control. And then I sprayed it with nonstick cooking spray, and now I am just pouring the batter into that pan with the parchment paper on the bottom. If you wanted to grease and flour a cake pan or a loaf pan, you could do it that way instead of this way. But for me, I find that I can get bread or cakes or whatever I'm cooking in the loaf pan out of it much easier if I use parchment paper. Probably because my pans are old and they stick. They cause food to stick to them. So that went into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I baked it for 45 minutes. And this is what it looks like after it came out of the oven. And you can see the failed eggless cake on the left. If you saw that, that was what that looked like. Now I'm going to make the glaze. It's later and the cakes have cooled, and so I'm going to make the glaze using 1 cup of powdered sugar, 2 tablespoons of milk, although I think that I would use less milk and have it be a thicker glaze, a half a teaspoon of the lemon extract, and the juice of 1/4 of a lemon. And I wasn't quite sure how much juice 1/4 of a lemon would have, so I just guessed. It was probably more than 1/4 of a lemon would have, but I had already juiced everything up ahead of time, so I didn't know. So there goes the lemon extract, and then you just need to stir it with a spoon. So happy that I had put the parchment paper in this pan as I was having trouble getting it out. But just had to go around the cake with a knife on the ends to get it to come out. And after it cools completely, then I am going to drizzle this glaze on top of it. And then you have to let it set again for the glaze to set up. So you really have to plan ahead if you're going to use this as a dessert or a brunch item or breakfast. It's not hard, it just has a few steps. And I don't know why my cake sunk in the middle. It was completely cooked through, but it sunk a little in the center. But that didn't affect the taste. And I wasn't sure how much glaze this needed. And you can leave out some of the milk and make the glaze thicker. I believe that the Starbucks cakes have a thicker frosting type icing on it instead of a thin glaze like this. I've never tried them, but I've seen them in their bakery case. A baking rack with a baking sheet underneath it will catch all of the icing drips. But if you don't have a rack, a cooling rack, just use a piece of waxed paper or parchment paper or even a piece of foil underneath the cake as you're drizzling will work. Here it is, and I'm just waiting for the icing or the glaze to set up before I cut into it. It's a really pretty cake, I think. And if you zest and juice lemons and bake a cake, your house just smells wonderful. So here we have a lemon loaf or lemon cake loaf. It held together well and was not dry or crumbly. This would be the perfect spring dessert or brunch idea. for Easter maybe. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, I'll have the written recipe in the description box so you can go back and refer to that. Take care, and I hope you're having a good day. Goodbye.